So thank you all for joining us for Noted's first 2021 virtual event in partnership with Docs and Associates. So my name is Lauren Strahorn. I am the founder, editor-in-chief of Noted. We are a digital media platform that informs many millennial women of color, particularly Black women, on today's news while celebrating and highlighting our culture in the world. We curate a weekly newsletter that provides news perspective and cultural highlights and provide additional resources, including events such as the one that we're hosting today, infographics, and opportunities for content submissions on our website, noted.com. So this event has been a long time coming. It was an idea right before the pandemic. And really looking forward to our discussion as it stemmed from an article that I read on the importance of mentorship for Black women and women of color personally and professionally. However, the biggest takeaway was how these opportunities for sponsorship and coaching were not discussed or not even available. So today we have a fantastic panel of Black women professionals of various backgrounds and experiences. Their roles and workplaces are represented across multiple industries which will make for, a very fruitful discussion. So this said, I just wanted to get through a couple of housekeeping items and then I will turn it over to our event partner and moderator. So please remember to keep your videos off and mics muted so that all of the focus can be placed on our panelist and moderator. If you would like, you may either use the speaker view or pin each of our panelists and moderator to allow you to only see them during this event. Feel free to use the chat feature to ask any questions, as we'll either add them into the discussion flow or designate them for a dedicated Q&A time. We are recording this event to produce content for our channels as well as for the ladies here. So only panelists and the moderators will be featured in these recordings. But if you have any concerns, please feel free to reach out to me directly. Lastly, our focus for today is on the topic at hand. These women are here to talk through and chat through their experiences and provide their level of expertise, but anything related to hiring, job availability, etc. Again, please send those questions directly to me. I will then send it to the appropriate person at hand. So without further ado, Darlene, I'll hand it over to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Lauren. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us again. If you don't have a pen or paper or a sticky note to put on your vision board, I advise for you to grab that now because we're about to be enlightened with some great information by the panelists. And at this time, I want to take the time to introduce everyone. As I call your name, just kind of give a little wave. Latoya LJ Finney. Hi, Latoya. Thank you for joining us today. So LJ is a certified project management professional with over 20 years of experience on Wall Street and technology. And as president of her own company, IN18 LLC, I said that correctly, right? She helps individuals and companies through leadership development. She works to help employees at all levels make the most of their skills for career growth. LJ holds a Bachelor's of Information Systems from Long Island University, a Master's of Science in Computer Science from NYU Tandon School of Engineering. Hi, LJ. Next, we have Ms. Lori Georges Lane. Lori is a former HR executive of 25 years that now leads her own consulting firm, LGL Consulting and Executive Advisory Group, LLC. Lori holds tenure in disciplines that include industries such as energy, healthcare, financial services, and retail. She has provided services domestically and abroad. Lori has earned degrees from the University of Florida, Nova Southeastern Shepherd Broad Law School, Nova Southeastern H. Wayne Huizenga School of Business. She poses candidacy in the Harvard School of Business and recently earned her Florida Supreme Court Civil Circuit Mediator credentials. Hi, Lori. Last but not least, we have Lauren Legette. Lauren Legette is the business lead of business product marketing at Facebook Inc. She leads strategy, business, and management initiatives for the company and business product marketing, supporting 180 million businesses. Outside of work, Lauren is involved with several philanthropic activities, including volunteering as a Girl Scout troop co-leader. Lauren has a bachelor's degree in broadcast journalism with a minor in advertising from Hampton University. She also holds a certification in leading executive education from Harvard Business School. Hi, Lauren. So let's get started. The first question will go out to all the ladies on the panel. Ladies, give me your definition of a mentor, a sponsor, and a coach. Anyone can go first. How about you, Lori? You go first.
Okay, well, hello everyone. I want to welcome all the participants on today's Zoom call. Well, let me open it with this: is working hard and being smart is not enough. There's certainly power in relationships, hence a mentor, a coach, and a sponsor is necessary. Now, you may use these positions at different times in your life, career, outside ventures, but they're necessary. So when I think about a mentor, I think about someone who's going to model the way for you, who's going to give you the formula. Typically someone, it could be someone internal or external to your business or your company, but that's what they're charged to do. They're specific, they're giving you advice specific to your career, is what I consider a mentor. And so sponsorship, a sponsor, I believe is someone who is willing to risk their social and political capital within the company for you. They speak on your behalf. These are people that are heavily influential. They have power, they have a definite seat at the table, and they sway easily. And so these people will make it happen for you, put dollars behind you and your name and programs to make it happen for you. And so lastly, coaches, I believe, are people that are exactly what it sounds like, rooting you on in your endeavors. So that might be career or outside of your career, but really pushing you along and stretching you to the next level.
Thank you, Lori. LJ, would you like to go next? Give us your definition.
Sure. I mean, I think Lori did a great job defining it. How many definitions can you have? I think to add on or to add value to the conversation, for mentorship, look at it as the people that will help you navigate through difficult challenges when you need advice in your career, when you need advice and understanding how to navigate situations you may not have experienced before. So look at mentors as the people that kind of help you along. Maybe they're like parents and siblings, and you think of it from a professional perspective, it'd be the manager or the leader or different people that can help you model your career and model your career behavior or how you are engaging in the office. Whereas a sponsor is the person that will open the doors and usher you through. They are the people that have the position to, or have the power to move things in a way that give you opportunities and you show up. They're not walking alongside you. They are almost like the chess master or the puppeteers, the puppet master. They can make things happen for you. And sometimes unbeknownst to you, they choose you, whereas mentors, you choose each other. Mm-hmm. The sponsor is sometimes a person that sees favor or sees themselves in you or sees potential and power in you. And they want to ensure that you are in the position to succeed by placing you there because they are advocating for you in rooms that you may never enter or may even not even know that your name has been brought up. A coach is a person, and to Lori's point, they're rooting you on, but they're also helping you discover what is deeply built and deeply within you. So in most cases, you know what your innermost desire is, you know what your definition for success is, whether or not your mindset is fixed or you have a growth mindset and you've identified that this is not for you. Somewhere deep down inside, you know that you have the potential and the capability. A coach helps you chart a path forward to achieving and accomplishing those long-term goals, and even helping you identify them where you may not be looking at it from the perspective that you can achieve it. So it might not even be on your vision board yet. Coaches will help you define what you deeply desire and help you work towards them.
Outstanding. Thank you, LJ. Lauren, give us your shot, your definition.
Absolutely. So honored to be here today and to share the virtual stage with the panelists here. I will just quickly add 2 points. I think we've covered mentor pretty well. I think for sponsors, what I'll add is, they are people who are talking about you in rooms that you're not in. They're seeding new opportunity, new business opportunity for you, and highlighting opportunities for growth, professional development, and really, encouraging you to seek opportunities that you may not even be aware of. What I will say for coaches, or perhaps advisors, as I often call them, I think they have a specific domain expertise and they're helping you achieve a very specific goal. Whereas mentors often kind of stretch across a professional or personal goal that you might have. A coach is working towards a specific goal that you've identified that you'd like to work one-to-one with them.
Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate that. So my first question, I'm going to direct my solo question to LJ. LJ, I know we kind of went over the definition, but to you and in your experience, what's the difference between a mentor and a sponsor in your own experience?
In my experiences, the mentors have been the people that helped me solve problems. So when I first, I'd say early in my career, I entered into a professional workspace that I was not familiar with. I remember going to my first job on my first day and asking my grandmother what I should wear. And she bought me this lovely lilac suit. And I had patent leather shoes, and I looked like I was going to church because, in her mind, going to a professional job was like going to church. You'd get dressed up, not knowing that I was going to be in a manufacturing firm with a lot of technologists and understanding like there's a domain and a space there. So everyone had on khaki pants and they had on polo shirts. And here I come with my patent leather shoes, my lavender suit. And in that moment, a mentor would have been useful because they would have been able to tell me what appropriate workplace attire is. But my grandmother, God bless her soul, she was a nurse, and to her, getting dressed up and dressing to the nines was wearing your best church outfit. I'm so glad I didn't have hats. I would have probably walked in there with my Sunday hat on. But in my experience, mentors are the people that help you navigate spaces that you've not experienced before. They give you the tools and they give you the equipment you need to be successful and to show up authentically, but then also to how to show up and be effective in those moments, because sometimes you only have one time to make an impression. Whereas for me, sponsorship were spaces that I didn't even know it was happening. I think I was in a job at Barclays. I was working at Barclays and I was on the desk doing development work in a very heavy programmatic support role. And a woman came up to me and she was a managing director and she said, "You would really make a good business analyst." And I was like, I don't even know what that means. It's not really a job here. I don't know what you're talking about. But I kind of understood what the role entailed. We did that in tandem with our development work. She ended up being the person that pulled me into her department and took me off the trading desk when the management team did not want me to, because we were at Lehman. I was at Barclays and Lehman got acquired, and I was serving a function and a purpose, but it wasn't helping me in my career. And I knew that at some point in time, like it just wasn't going to serve me. And this woman she went to bat for me against the other managing directors that wanted to keep me in the support role, pulled me into her team, created a role for me to do the work that she believed that I could do, just by me expressing that I was interested in learning more about doing the thing that she brought up. That would be sponsorship versus mentorship in my life.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. Next question, Lori. As an executive career coach, what do you find that as women of color, we don't know about the importance of having a career coach or a sponsor?
Yeah, so much to say around that question. First off, I want everyone to know, and most times people of color don't know this. One is that if they see value in you, they will create the position and they will create the money, the budget. They will get the money from the budget. They'll make it happen for you, number one. And so when I think about sponsorship and what that means in coaching executives, is that it's an overall awareness that most people don't have. In a corporate setting, there are ample opportunities to have an executive coach The company put dollars behind you to make sure that you are prepared for the next level, right? To go into that executive role or that senior executive role. They actually put dollars behind you. So as an executive coach, that's what I'm always reminding my clients of, is that there are opportunities and what are you missing out on? So really coaching them on making sure they're connecting with the right people within the organization. Have they identified the internal and the external stakeholders, which I think is critical. Oftentimes we don't know who they are. So we may be, we may say, I'm going to get out there and I'm going to meet some people, and you're hanging out and having lunch with a bottom performer. And so with that being said, leadership sees that as association. So really understanding who has a voice, again, whether it's an internal or external stakeholder, is extremely critical in any organization.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Lauren, next question is headed your way. In your experience, when seeking a mentor or a sponsor or even a coach, what would you say women should be seeking for themselves?
Absolutely. I think when you talk about sourcing a mentor, sponsor, or advisor, there's a couple of things. Number one, I think it's important to really ground yourself that it's important to have a full personal board. And so what I mean by that is mentors, sponsors, or coaches, they all have a role in your growth and development, and you should actually subscribe to all three. That would make up your personal board. The second thing is to think about, what is it that you need as you think about mentorship, sponsorship, or coaching? How do you receive information, and what type of characteristics does that person need to have in order to be an effective, advisee in your life? The third and final thing is being really clear about your goals and what you're looking to achieve. So for example, I think a lot of people think about mentorship and say it's a buzzy word, and so I know that I need a mentor, but they're not really clear on what their goals are. And so often they seek mentors and say, hey, will you be my mentor? But they're not really sure what that actually means and what they're looking to get out of the relationship. And so I find if you're super specific about what it is that you're seeking, what your goals are, and how that individual is equipped with the skills and the experience to help you, that conversation will be fruitful for both people. You have to be also mindful of the fact that, for the mentor, they're sacrificing time to spend, helping you grow or helping you achieve your goal. And so what they'll want is for someone to be super dedicated to the idea of what they're looking for and how that individual can help. So being clear on your goals and what you're seeking is critical to an effective mentor-mentee relationship.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, this is a twofold question for the panelists. Is it relevant for there to be representation for women of color as well? Is it relevant that, as Black women, that we have representation as a mentor or a sponsor or a coach within our respective fields? That's my first question. The second part of that question is, why is it important, if you do feel like it's relevant, why do you think it's so important to have another woman of color who would help along with your career path in regards to mentor or coaching or sponsorship? Lauren, let's go ahead and start with you since you were the last to speak.
Sure, absolutely. I think that's a very personal question. I mean, I think, for each person, it could be different. Going back to the idea of having a personal board, for me, one person on that personal board at the very minimum is a person of color, a woman of color. And that's because I feel like I need someone who can be very real and raw with me and talk through, experiences that you have in the workplace. I think being at the intersection of being a woman and a Black woman at that, I think often comes with its own unique circumstances and situational needs. And so being able to have, really transparent conversations with someone who's been in your shoes and has been through those experiences and has navigated them, and in many cases has often made mistakes, being able to learn from their mistakes and apply that directly to your life is pretty critical. And again, if you think about the concept of a personal board, for me, I have 2 mentors, I have 2 sponsors, and I have 2 coaches. And you're able to balance their guidance or their advice by having people who kind of fit different demographics or personality needs.
That's okay. LJ.
Sure. I think it is very personal. I'd say in my experience, I've not had as many women of color be my sponsor or mentor, and I think that's by way of the fact that there weren't many there to have as a mentor. So in many cases, I was the only Black woman on my team, or sometimes the only Black woman in technology as a whole, or in the company, in a leadership role, whereas all the other Black women might have been admins and secretaries. So I was in a very homogenous work environment, and there was a lot of pressure. I sought mentors outside of the industry, but they couldn't often identify with the challenges or the experiences that I was having as in a very well-informed technologist, and also being able to see what was happening around me where there was maybe more social promotion or individuals that were in roles of leadership that didn't quite have any specific skill or technology experience. So there were scenarios where you saw that the person in the role was going to be intimidated by you very soon and very shortly. And so for me, the key was finding the advocates and the allies that were senior, that did not look like me, but that would be in that room and be able to defend me and understand the quality and content of my work. I'd say from a personal, emotional standpoint, I found female mentors throughout, like I'm a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. Of course, I have to shout that out at some point on this recording. And I think that I found a lot of mentorship and support through my sorority sisters or people that had been in workplace environments that had to navigate that. But when I look at my professional career and I look at the sponsors, many of the people that had the keys to open those doors were not of color, and just because they weren't there. So the question is, how do we feel about entering into, for me, the question would always be, how do I feel about entering into this next workplace where I might not find a lot of women of color that are in these roles, or I might not get access to them as easily. When I got to Goldman Sachs, I felt like there were more women of color, but those women still weren't the advocates that opened the doors. It ended up being the people that were closest to me and that were willing to step out. So that was my personal experience.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you. It's great insight there. Lori.
So if I understand your question, Darlene, you're asking whether is it relevant to have mentors of color?
Yep.
Okay, absolutely. So in my 25-year career, I had very little. And so those advocates for me were white women. They were white women. Oftentimes I was the youngest on our executive team, and they sought me out because they saw that there was a gap. And so at times it was difficult because culturally, I know that there's some differences there. I think both LJ and Lauren alluded to that there is a connection with women of color, that they can say something to you and it resonates differently than someone else, how someone else says it to you. So I had that experience. It was a good experience. However, I endeavor and continue to endeavor to be a woman of color that does serve as a sponsor, a mentor, and a coach, because it's needed. If, in fact, women of color or people of color in general, and women in general, don't have these positions batting for them, it's very unlikely that they'll see growth in their career, and be quite honest. And being in those rooms and listening and being part of those decisions, it's a very real thing, the socializing of your team. And so if you don't have someone in those rooms saying, no, LJ, I think is a great candidate, or is great for this leadership program, it almost goes unsaid. And so again, oftentimes people of color don't know that those meetings exist. So really giving them the exposure, getting them to buy in, socializing their name, socializing them is critical. But I have to say that it was white women that really took me by the hand and said, hey, this is a no-no. And most of the industries that I worked in, I wouldn't say were heavily male dominated. I think it was probably more women based off the HR and the law. But it is critical to have a mentor and sponsor personal, I think for me, to be a woman of color.
Okay. I forgot to ask this earlier to our trifecta on the panel here. Are any of you currently mentoring or sponsoring or providing any type of coaching currently? All of you. Okay. Okay. All right.
For free, outside of my business, for free. Yes.
A big difference, because that means you're actually taking the time out and where you can be earning money and putting it back into your business, and you're offering, sound insight and advice from your personal experience. I think that means a lot. I would hope.
Absolutely. I think we'd be remiss. I'm just going to speak for myself as a Black woman, first generation college grad, first person in my family to go to college, of Caribbean descent. I'd be remiss not to help someone else.
Yeah.
How dare I not help someone else? And, I'll talk a little bit about our former First Lady, Michelle Obama. She talks about mentorship heavily. This is actually, I didn't know it was a thing, but it's National Mentorship Month. And she talks about how it is our duty to make sure we pull somebody up with us. So I think I'd be remiss, how dare the audacity for me not to help someone. I made my point. There's no way that I wouldn't, right?
Ladies, how do you feel about that as well?
I mean,
Okay.
to further our conversation, it's like I haven't been given all of these gifts to keep them to myself, for me to share. And I think that when we look at the trajectory of our lives, we have time, and there are times when we're gonna eventually pass. This information is meant to be shared. Think about the wealth of knowledge that we are benefiting from because someone shared it with us. And so for me, I volunteer and give back because I know that it can't stay with. It is a seed that needs to grow, and I need to give it to as many people as possible, because I don't know what it will grow into for each person. Anything that I've given, that I've gotten, I've received and I've been given, I have to give back, because I know that for them it will be something that will grow into to who knows what else. Because I think that that's just the circle of life.
Yeah. I like that. Thank you, ma'am. I like that. I like that a lot. Yes, Miss Lauren.
I echo the sentiments of LJ and Lori. I'll just add that, I think mentorship also shows up in so many different channels or different ways. I think this panel right now is a form of mentorship where we're sharing the insights of what we've experienced. And I think it shows up in so many different ways, not just in the traditional sense of a one-to-one relationship. And I think that the way to continue to scale the knowledge that you've gained is also expanding, whether it's Clubhouse or a blog post or the like. I think sharing the knowledge that you've gained and helping others learn from the things that you have learned from others, but also learning from your mistakes is critical to your own development. And so I think it's pretty critical to everything that I do, for sure.
Now, ladies, you speak so eloquently about, mentoring and coaching and sponsoring, receiving it and giving it. Now, do you three recently, and I think Lauren, you answered this question before, but I don't think I've heard it from Lori or LJ. Do you both still have mentors as you're mentoring or sponsoring or coaching?
Right. I will be learning for the rest of my life. And so absolutely, I have mentors. I have mentors that I see regularly and talk to regularly. And I also have mentors that don't know they're my mentors. For instance, Aliko Dangote, who is Nigerian billionaire, the richest Black man in the world. And so he's a far mentor, not because of those reasons, but because of how he started his business. He started his empire with commodities like rice and sugar, and then went into cement and then oil. But one advice that he gives, I do a lot of reading and research and listen to some of these YouTube videos that he has done, is that he says, and as an entrepreneur right now, it resonates with me. He says, if you have a mass of money in the bank, it means your money's not working for you. So what are you doing with that? And so as an entrepreneur, you want to see 100,000 K, in that business account. You want to see some money. But when you think about, this man is the richest Black man in the world, and he's saying, no, take most of that and make it work. And so that's just an example as I think about people that continue to mentor me. Yeah, Carla Harris is a mentor afar, executive leader with Morgan Stanley, is just wonderful. And she gives nuggets as well. So to answer your question, absolutely. As long as I'm still learning, I will have mentors. Yes.
Well said. What about you, LJ?
So I think my career transition has forced me to think about the mentors that I've added. I think over time, as your career starts to change, or as I've stepped into this entrepreneurial space, the mentors that I have, it's changed. I've looked at more people that are in this business doing things well and doing it with excellence. And my vision is I want to learn more about how that works, how to do that, how to execute with such efficiency and with such diligence, and understand the journey to get there, because I'm looking at their finished product, but I don't know what their journey is. And so I do have mentors, but they're not the same mentors that I started with. My technology, as I was going in my technology career, the mentors were like MDs and people in those roles. But now that I'm an entrepreneur, that mentorship might be helpful to understand what diligence and hard work is, but I kind of understand that. I understand that, and I've adopted and embraced that. So now my mentorship is, what does being an entrepreneur look like? What does work-life balance look like in a space where you are your work?
Yeah.
Where if you sleep, that means you are not working on your business. If you are working in your business, you're not working on your business. And how do you expand when you are one person with 24 hours, the same 24 hours everyone else gets, but how do you do more? And so I do have mentors, and I'm continuing to expand that. As for sponsors, I don't know that I have the same sponsors as I did, but I do know that God favors me. And so they swoop in and it just magically appear when I don't expect it. And one
Yes.
person reached out to me that I used to work with when I was at Barclays. She was a senior manager. And she said, "What are you up to?" Who knew that that was the call to say, well, actually, I have a fund that I'm starting and I'm looking for some organizations. And I think you might know who would be the good recipient. And I just thought, she has the power to open so many doors. And I don't even recognize that her just inquiry is the door, the sponsorship door. And I don't even recognize it. So I think it's important to be observant of when it's happening, because people are just checking on you because they genuinely care about you, but they genuinely may want to open a door for you if you are able to ask for it.
I agree.
Wow.
Yeah. Well,
I love that.
yeah.
LJ, I love what you just said because it happens all the time to me. People just call and you realize you have these sponsors unbeknownst to you. And I tell people often that I feel like I meet us every time I interact or network with someone, I think that person is a sponsor because they can step in a room and speak on my behalf and drive business for me and drive revenue for me or on my behalf. But I love what you just said. They just kind of, they call and, hey, what's going on? By the way, I have this client that needs XYZ. And you're like, okay, that's a $50,000 contract. Thank you. I'll take that. Yeah.
One of the things I love about what LJ mentioned as well is this idea of sort of outgrowing some of your mentors, sponsors, and advisors. And I think that's something that we don't talk a lot about. I think just as your wardrobe changes or your style changes or your preferences change, as do your personal board members. And I think that that's okay. In fact, I think that shows the impact that the person has had on your growth and development, and you've learned what you can learn from them. And now your goals have shifted or evolved. And so I think that's a really critical point to being an effective mentee, is again, being super clear about what it is that you need. And then once you've received that information from that individual, being okay parting ways and finding the next person who can help you achieve your goal. I think sometimes people feel like, okay, you're my mentor for life, and that's just what it is. And I'm super happy with that. But I think it's important to have a constant need to, I would say, refresh or evaluate the impact that they're having on your life and being open to having that transparent conversation. I would say for me, one of the things that I've learned is that a mentor can be in your life for a year or for 10 years, or a couple of months. And I think, being able to have those checks and balances in place where you're evaluating that and making sure that this, relationship is fruitful is really important. So thank you for bringing that up, LJ.
If I go ahead.
Sorry, I would add the transition of the mentorship relationship. Most of mine have evolved into friendships because the dynamic, it's more like a shifted the power dynamic where they recognize, and a good mentor will recognize that you've reached a certain point where they can no longer serve you in that function, but would look at you as a peer and potentially as a sponsor, in the sense that they can now open a door for you because they are aware of what you're capable of. And so for me, I often go into the mentorship moment, or the moments where I've been mentored, and I think, what value can I add to this equation, this dynamic? What can I give back? Because I know in my heart, in time, I will be at your level and we will be peers. And hopefully you're still going on and you're like moving up in your career and life. But at some point we will have a more of a mutual exchange of experience. And
Yes, thank you, ma'am. Lori, were you going to say something? Were you going to add to that? Is she frozen? She's good. Lori, were you going to add to that? Lori? Oh, she is off. Okay, hopefully we'll, nope, she's back. Lori, did you hear the question? I think you were going to add something to what Lauren was saying.
I'm so sorry. I was having technical difficulty in the age of Zoom. Um, so I was going to add, and maybe another perspective to think about, is that oftentimes we as women, because we're loyal, will hold on to a mentor that doesn't fit. And so in the meantime, you're not gaining what you need. And so you're kind of suffering in silence in a sense, and you're stalled because for the sake of being loyal. We're loyal people, especially as women of color, we're extremely loyal. So I think that's something that we have to think about as we transition and identify mentors.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. Lauren, I want to circle back to you as Lori talk about in the virtual environment. How does one seek a mentor or sponsor in a virtual environment? For instance, I basically started a new job in July, the latter part of July. And I was actually looking for someone, to mentor me. But it's hard because you don't have a personal connection. You've never really met the person with the exception of a screen. So in a virtual environment, how would you suggest that women can go about seeking either a sponsor, within the organization, or a mentor, and someone to just kind of speak on their behalf? How would you guide someone on that?
It's a great question, because you're right, the dynamics have changed in this virtual world. But I think it's really important to continue to invest the time into understanding who the person is that might be that prospect for a mentor. Really learning who they are and what about them that you admire. Taking a little bit of time to interview them. So setting up time for a coffee chat, or attending a panel that they're speaking at, or reading a blog post, just really understanding how they think about a given topic, or their philosophy and their approach to professional growth, and being able to really clearly understand who they are. And then from there, if you haven't already, developed some type of relationship, be it, online through a virtual coffee chat or the like, but setting up time to get to know them, asking others who might be working very closely with them, what it is that they provide in their relationships. And then I would say one of the things that's really important is leveraging maybe a mutual friend or a mutual colleague who has a relationship with that individual, who can advocate for the type of person that you are. I think when we're talking about this virtual world, we all know that our time is limited, and we're spending so much time trying to juggle our priorities both at work and at home, with so many restrictions. And so being able to have someone who can advocate for you being someone who's dedicated, or someone who will take and leverage the time in a useful manner is really important. And then I think just finally acknowledging the fact that we're in a virtual world and I'm seeking a mentor. And ideally, this is not the best circumstance to be able to start a relationship, but being very clear about what it is that you need and the time that you'd like to request from that individual. I think all of the above will be really helpful tips to navigating this unusual time.
Okay. Does anybody want to piggyback off of what Lauren provided here? LJ?
Sure. I tend to use golf as my tool for interacting with people. So it's probably less fair if you had been playing golf for a while and other people play. You can invite them out, because that's an activity you can still do in person, and it's a great way to get to know someone and build relationships. I'd say in the virtual world, another data and information is available to you. Do your research, get to know what you can about a person, whether they are interested in certain things. Say you can reach out to them and send them information that's useful. I think one of the key value add aspects of the being online is that information is available. You can do research, you can see what people are personally interested in, and use that as an introductory a way to introduce yourself and step out of your comfort zone. Like right now, maybe before you could bump into someone, you cannot do that. You're not going to bump into anyone. You have to be intentional and reach out, and maybe you start your introduction the same way. Hi, I am so and so in this team. I understand you're doing this. Love to hear more about it. Could we schedule 10 minutes to catch up? And not 30 minutes, not an hour. You need 10 to 15 minutes to get your point across. I'd say even ask for 5 minutes to at least get the introduction and figure out where this could go. Because within 5 to 10 minutes, you'll know if you want to speak to someone, especially on Zoom. 3 minutes, I usually know how long this.
That's great advice. And the good thing about the golf, I know we kind of spoke about that earlier, is that you can still be 6 feet apart. You know, you got the air space and everything. You can still do the 6 feet apart. Lori, would you like to add to that? I do have another question for you, but would you like to add to that?
I will. And so I actually think now is a better time to identify a mentor because people have to kind of sit still right now. And so you can secure some time. Again, you know, not an hour, right? You're going to do 10 minutes. And believe me, if that person in 10 minutes wants to continue their conversation, they'll continue the conversation. The other thing that I was going to say right now is your participation in a community. What I've done that has really been helpful is becoming active in the political process and community organizations. Since LJ shouted out AKA, I have to shout out DST. So being, you know, joining boards and being active on city boards and things like that has helped. Meeting people that normally you would not meet. We have done some virtuals, but we also have done some things that are live safely. But it does give you an opportunity to talk to folks that typically you will not interact with. So I actually think virtual right now is a good thing.
Okay. I wanted to kind of, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Lauren.
Lori, I did not know we were sorority sisters. We'll have to talk further about that.
LL, I'm telling you.
All right, now that we've gotten that out the way, we got AKAs and deltas on the panel here.
Right, it's another way to network and connect. That's forever.
Yeah. Lori, you know, you mentioned this earlier. I wanted to know, is it important to have a sponsor or a mentor within the company? That's part one of my question. And if it's not, then how do you go about seeking someone outside of your industry or something like that?
Okay, so if I'm understanding correctly, and let me know if I'm misunderstanding your question, is it important to have a mentor or sponsor within your company?
With a sponsor, I would think that it is important to have someone on the inside, but as for a
color.
For a mentor, yes. For a mentor, would you say specifically that it's necessary to have someone in the company or within the industry? Is that necessary?
Yeah, I do. I think so. A couple of different things. I want to layer this response. One, I think it's necessary because of the implicit biases, the hidden biases that exist in companies and everywhere you go. That you're going to need someone to help you navigate the corporate culture. You're going to need that. And does it need to be a woman of color? Not necessarily. I think because I've had white men, I think I said that, no, I said white women earlier, but I've had white men that totally opened the doors for me, that spoke on my behalf, that told me, and it was good because it was direct feedback that told me what I wasn't doing. And the person being a white man really helped in the way also because they knew the politics, they knew what senior leadership was looking for. And so I use that, I totally leverage that to my advantage. So I think it's a nice to have, unfortunately, and LJ alluded to it earlier. We don't always see that in the corporate setting. We don't always see people that look like us. So the next best thing for me was, okay, I'm a white male, and that person sought me out. So yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah. Actually, I don't know if you took a sneak peek at my questions here on my card. That was my next question for the entire panel about men.
Oh.
We talk about women of color and women in general being mentors and sponsors for our career paths. What about men? What have either of you, we know Lori have, but LJ and Lauren, have either of you had men as mentors? White, Black, doesn't matter.
Yes, one of my current mentors is a male. For me, it's been super helpful. I think, you know, the difference in the way that he thinks about things and the way that, you know, I think the reality is that a lot of the rooms that I'm in, a lot of people don't look like me, whether that's the color of my skin or my gender. I'm not often in rooms where, you know, people look like me, and so their experiences are different. The way that they process information is different. The way that they make decisions is different, frankly, than my approach. And so I think that balance is equally important for me. Again, I think going back to my initial answer on the previous question around, you know, if having a woman of color is critical, I think it's a personal choice. But for me, in the way that I think and the way that I process information, it's been vital.
Awesome. Yes, LJ.
Yeah, so for me, it's the same. A majority of the sponsors and mentors I've had were men. When there are women present, there would be female sponsors, but the challenge was when I was in the roles that I was in, majority of the leadership was male. And I think it's also important to not automatically assume that because there's a woman or a person of color or a man of color, that they will be an advocate for you, because there's, you know, I guess the easiest way to say it is everybody is not going to be for you. Some people will want you to go through the trials and tribulations they've experienced, and that is their approach and their opinion. But I think it's on us to be more diligent about who we select as mentors and who truly has our best interest and advancing others below them to positions of power. There can't be a threat there. So I think that's one thing that we haven't gotten to or talked about just yet, but just because they're more senior doesn't mean they're going to be an advocate or a good mentor. So be wary when you seek out mentors and be mindful of what that person demonstrates without you being around or without other people present.
I'm so
That is,
oh, go ahead, Lori.
no, I was just gonna say, LJ, you nailed it. You nailed it, because there are folks that are not in your best interest. And so in identifying a mentor, you want to make sure, one, is that person trustworthy? Do they understand your truth? Do they align with your long and short-term goals? And then lastly, do they have strengths where you have areas of opportunities? Oftentimes people take on mentors or ask people to be mentors, and they have the same gaps that you have. So ideally, you want to partner with people that where you have gaps or opportunities is an area of strength for them.
Lori, I'm gonna need you to stay off my my question cards, please. Because that was my next question, but I'll ask something else. So LJ, you talk about how majority of your mentors were men. Now, how do you find your advocates in a male-dominated field to be a sponsor or a mentor?
That's an interesting question. I think it's doing the work and bringing visibility to the work that you are doing and keeping it very focused on the work that you're doing and kind of bringing them into the process and asking like thoughtful questions, not questions that you can get the answer to. I think I think I saw in the chat someone asked, how do you get a mentor or sponsor? But for me, it's really asking the questions or getting the insights that you need. I think sometimes people feel like, or I've seen in the past where someone may approach their mentor with a question that they really didn't need that mentor's insight or input on. And I think that's a waste of time and a missed opportunity as well. So I think for the question that you're asking, how do you find them? It's when you're sharing the information about what you're working on, there are people that are going to be keenly interested in what you're doing. And you'll see that kind of interest. They might ask a follow-up question. Keep cultivating the relationship. A mentor doesn't happen overnight. It is a series of interactions to the point where the person feels like they can give you insight and you will act on it. Because think about all the advice that people give. If you don't act on it, why is that a good use of their time?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd like the other ladies to answer that question as well, not about the male dominated field, but what's the best way to go about asking for a mentor or a sponsor? Lauren.
Okay.
Sure. I think it's important to start with, not being afraid of rejection. I think the panelists today have both talked about this idea of, leveraging that person's time wisely. And I think sometimes that means that the person's at capacity, whether they're mentoring others and their bandwidth is limited, or frankly, they may not think that they're a good fit for you. And so I would say not being afraid of rejection is probably the first thing. The second thing is doing the research about the individual. I find that it's most effective to be able to specifically say in your ask why you think they're a good fit. Because, a lot of people, especially the very best at mentoring, are often asked many times to be someone's mentor. And so being very specific about your needs and why they're a good fit are critical. And then I would say being able to clearly define how you are going to leverage their time and what the cadence looks like. For me, I believe that mentorship is not really mentorship unless you're committed to meeting with that individual at least 2 times a month.
Okay.
For sponsors, I would say it's about 2 times a year or more. And then for coaches or advisors, I would say it's on an as needed basis. And so if you think about, again, your personal board and leveraging all of those people, it's a lot of time that you're investing, and it's a lot of time that they're investing in you. And so you want to use that time wisely and be very upfront about what it is that you need in your ask. And then once you've received the okay and that someone's on board to serve as your mentor, sponsor, or advisor, the next thing I would say is just being very diligent about setting your agenda in advance and sending any pre-reads or questions that you want to walk through or agendas in advance so that they understand how you want to leverage the time that you have with them. And then finally, I think LJ just touched on it a minute ago, but being very clear on the follow through. So for example, you've had a discussion, they've given you advice. I always think it's a good rule of thumb to then within the next 24 hours, send an email that says, I heard from you this, and therefore my commitments are to do X, Y, and Z. And I think being super crisp and leveraging their time wisely and demonstrating that both in the initial ask, but also once you've developed the relationship and they are your mentor, will lead to success.
Great answer. I could use that for myself. I really appreciated that one. Thank you. Laura, you want to go ahead and touch on that as well?
Right. So in an effort to not be redundant, I do want to bring up one more perspective, is that understand that when you're on stage or you're in a meeting with a series of leaders, that you're being observed. And so there are times where mentors will seek you out based on what they hear you say. So it's critical that when you're on stage and you're in these meetings with these key decision makers, that you speak at some point. I hear oftentimes people say, well, I didn't want to say anything, so-and-so already said it, but they didn't hear it from you. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes people, you think about who's in the room and you think about who could be a prospective peer. I used to think that all the time in a room. Who's a prospective peer? Who could be my peer moving forward? So it's critical that folks speak up when they're in these meetings. They're in the meetings for a reason. You're not in the meeting to keep quiet. If anything, multiple invites to meetings where you're quiet is going to work to your disadvantage. It's going to work in the reverse. So with that said, there are times where people, leaders in the meetings will seek you out because of how you presented yourself, your perspective, and your respectful challenges to maybe whatever that was being discussed.
That's good advice. LJ, back to you. Given your background working in both corporate America and as an entrepreneur, how did you seek mentorship as an entrepreneur? I mean, I know it can feel quite siloed.
Networking.
Yep.
I think there are people that will step into these advisory roles, they're teaching classes or they're doing something really well. Networking has given me the opportunity to identify mentors and identify sponsors, and it's a vetting process. So it's the same kind of process where I am meeting people and I understand what they do really well and I understand what I don't do well and what I'd like to learn how to do. And the more I listen to them, I see their ethic, I see like how they show up and the quality of their product or the quality of their communication or the quality of something, and I admire it and I want to learn more. I know my deficiency is sales. I'm not a salesperson. I like things to happen organically. I prefer word of mouth, and that will take me 125,000 years to actually build a business that way, because the importance of getting your product out is actually informing people about it and telling people about it. And so that's not my strength. So I found mentors that do that well, that are, and I'm not a shy person. So why do I struggle with such a very basic thing? And so my objective has been to identify people that I think do that well, that are effective, that aren't just talking, but actually executing. So for me, networking and attending events and then reaching out to people and adding value by volunteering in some capacities, just putting myself out there, that's been the best way for me to find mentors. And it's actually been a good thing in the sense that those people see my commitment and it's opened the door where they've made referrals. Like I volunteered to teach a class, that woman referred me to another group that needed a class created and taught. And that was a paying opportunity. Whereas I started off just giving because I believed in the mission of this other organization. So that is networking and volunteering has allowed me to identify mentors, partners, business opportunities, all of it.
Yeah, volunteering, that's always been a thing for me in regards to, like you said, LJ, not just networking, but building the steps to your career. I just want to say something real quick. When I lived in Germany, I didn't work. My husband's in the military, I didn't work, and I volunteered. And that is what helped me grow to where I am now. So the appreciation of volunteering is not beyond me. So thank you for that. So to the three of you, just in case our audience is wondering, how does one transition from being a mentee to a mentor? Lori.
I got to think about that one. How do they transition? I think just think back on some of the things that you as a mentee walk through, whether that be in your career or personal life, really being introspective as to what would my younger self need, or what would, someone newer in this industry or this new hire, what would that person need? I think would help easily transition someone from a mentee to a mentor. And it's all about, again, understanding the capacity of a person or yourself at that time, and understanding what the needs may be to help them matriculate easier in the organization and in the culture.
Okay. Lauren?
I would agree. I think because, as Lori called out earlier, I believe that it's important for me to still serve as a mentee as I continue to learn, which will be for the rest of my life. I think that transition kind of happens fluidly as a result. I think, once you have observed what it takes to be a good mentor through your relationship with your mentor, you're able to pick up best practices. I think it's also important to recognize you won't get it right the first time. And so I remember the very first time that I served as a mentor, I was very intentional about having a growth mindset. And what I mean by that is asking my mentee, am I serving you in the capacity that you had hoped? What is it that I'm doing that you appreciate and that you like most? And also, what are the things that I can do better to serve you as a mentor? And I think having that growth mindset and really taking the time to ask for feedback, reflecting on that and make those changes on an ongoing basis, I think is critical. Lori does this for a living, and I'm so honored to share the stage with her, but also to learn from her on sort of how she serves as a coach. But as someone who hasn't been professionally trained in what it takes to be a coach, I learned through influence and through my relationships. And so, continuing again to have that revolving door of feedback with your mentee to understand what works best for you, and jotting down from your mentors what you like about how they deliver information. I think that will prepare you to have that most impact when you do serve as a mentor.
Awesome. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, so I'd say the question, how to go from a mentee to a mentor, turn around and remember your journey and look back and look at where you came from, and then go back there, because every step that is in your path is the opportunity for you to mentor somebody else. Every place that you've risen from, every situation you've risen from, every scenario that you've grown from empowers you to mentor someone else. Credentials don't empower you to be a mentor, your experiences do. And so you've graduated from high school, you've left the community that you went to, you've left the college you went to, you might have left your first job, you might have left the role that you're in. Every one of those moments are an opportunity for you to become a mentor. And those are the opportunities for you to see what maybe you can be a better mentee as well by being a mentor. And I just say, turn around and remember where you came from. And it's like you follow your path backward to give back.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, ladies. So what we're going to do now is kind of wind down with the panelists in regards to the direct questions. But I would like one more thing for you guys to just drop your last piece of nugget, just one piece of nugget for the audience, and about mentoring, sponsoring, and coaching. And then we'll open it up for questions. Lauren.
Sure. I would say the number one tip I can give is be very specific about how that person can serve you when you're making the ask. Very quickly, the example I'll give for you is that in a previous company, I worked with Bozoma St. John, and hopefully everyone knows who she is. She's now the CMO of Netflix, and met her, developed a relationship with her and asked her to be my mentor. And she was like, no. And the reason why she said no was because, number one, she didn't believe in this idea of mentorship. She believes in she subscribes to this idea of a friendship or a relationship where we're mutually learning from each other. But additionally, if I reflect on that situation, I did not effectively ask her what it is that I needed. And I wasn't very specific about what I was hoping to gain from her and what knowledge and skills I was hoping to gain from her. Since then, the story ends in a positive note. We are really good friends, and I often reach out to her for feedback or advice to congratulate her on her accomplishments and vice versa. So it's a good story. But I think the lesson that I learned there is that my initial question just wasn't specific. And I think it's important to approach that ask with specificity.
All right, be specific. I hope the audience is writing this down and getting it on their sticky boards and their career vision boards. Lori, same question for you.
I would say always remember it's two-sided. It's a two-way interaction. And so please don't expect your mentor or your sponsor to do this on their own. This is also your investment in the relationship. So make sure you understand that it's a two-way interaction.
Outstanding, great advice. Thank you. LJ.
I'll say be strategic and be intentional. Think of it as a long-term strategy. Being intentional means it's not going to just happen. You have to put the effort in to get the result, and think about what your long-term goal is so that it's strategic how you're building these mentorship and sponsorship relationships.
All right, strategy. What was that, Lori? You were on mute.
I have one more. And your mentor doesn't always have to look like you. Your sponsor doesn't always have to look like you, please. And we're talking about women, and we're talking about women of color, which is paramount, but please don't miss out on an opportunity if a potential mentor or sponsor doesn't look like you.
Great. I love those last nuggets. I'm definitely mentally taking that down in my head. So at this time, I want to thank the panelists for taking the time out to answer all these questions, and hopefully your nuggets have resonated with our audience. So I'm going to turn it back over to Miss Lauren Strahorn as we answer some questions from the audience. Back to you, Lauren.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Darlene, for leading the effort and the charge here. I hope you all felt like I did. I took myself on video because every single time I'm, going back and forth to my notebook or trying to take pictures or just hanging out behind the scenes. So thank you, Darlene, for holding down the fort and really jiving in and getting the questions that we needed to ask here for our discussion. I'm going to actually do something that's probably a little out of the ordinary because my poll did not work at the beginning. So I am going to launch this poll, which was supposed to be questions to everybody at the beginning of the call. But it was, more so to get a feeling of where everybody is from. So if you can take your moment of clicking where you are joining us from. Are you joining us from New York, the DMV area, Chicago, Atlanta, LA, Houston, Orlando, San Francisco, Dallas, other? Want to just give some time to give some regional, some city shout outs here. So we've got some responses in. We can keep those going. And then our second question is, which of the following do you have in your professional trifecta? Do you have a mentor, a sponsor, a coach? Do you have two? Do you have a mentor and a coach, a mentor and a sponsor and a coach, all three? And then lastly, what brought you here to join our event? Did you want to learn new things? Were you really interested in our speaker lineup? Because that's definitely true here. Networking opportunities. Did I make you come join this? I want to just know the whole flow. So I see we've got some good responses. We're almost at full 100%. Got a few more people. Got 3 more folks. Get your responses in. Give it another 30 more seconds. All right, 10 more seconds left. I will call on the 2 people who haven't completed the poll yet, but I can't see that. I think Zoom meant to do that for me because I am sure to call somebody out. Okay, let's end the poll. So shout out to the DMV area here. We've got some good responses from our group and representation, but it looks like we've got everybody, a good mix of everyone representing. Overwhelmingly, we had more folks say that they had mentors. Nearly half say that they have mentors. It's really interesting to see that the second subset is at all of the above. So it's really great to hear that there are folks here who do have a mentor, a sponsor, and a coach. And I hope, from this dialogue, you were able to learn some new things. I want to know who exactly said that I made you come. Put that in the chat because I want to know. And I hope also too that this kind of generated some networking opportunities and an opportunity to, speak directly with our speakers. Please continue to add some more questions to the chat. I do have a couple that were shared during our dialogue. So this is a question for Lori and Lauren. Someone mentioned that they're looking to change careers, change industries. Their current mentor works in their current industry. So you both mentioned, and this is also an opportunity, LJ, if you want to jump into that, sometimes those relationships evolve, and that could be true to, career growth and choice of moving to another industry. What would you say is the best way to dissolve those relationships to start seeking someone new? And I'll start with Lori.
You said dissolve. The question was, how do you dissolve it?
How do you dissolve the relationship with your current mentor so that you can seek and find someone new?
I don't think you dissolve it. I think you always want to preserve relationships. Don't dissolve, because you don't know how that person might be instrumental moving forward. Just because that type of relationship has ended doesn't mean the relationship has to end. So I say, don't dissolve it, hold on to it. And then moving forward, that person may help you in identifying the next mentor. So my initial advice would be don't dissolve the relationship. And for the new industry, I think what helps is to go onto blogs. I think Lauren talked about that earlier in this virtual setting. And also do some things that around the actual industry, happy hours or, things like that, and go out and meet people. And you never know.
I would agree. I think the two things that I'll add are first, as she mentioned, you don't want to dissolve the relationship, but I think it's about having a transparent conversation on what your needs are now. It sounds like you're looking to pivot to a different industry and how you want to occupy that mentor space with somebody who can kind of help you think about that. I think transparency is really key, and you want to deliver the feedback delicately by acknowledging the impact that they've had on your life, but also being clear about where your goals are headed now. And the feedback that I would also offer is consider getting a sponsor who is in the industry that you seek to be in. I also made a career pivot, and I talk a lot about professional pivots and how to do that. And for me, having a sponsor in the industry that I desire to move into, which roughly 7 years ago was tech, that's pretty tricky to do when I have a background in television and production and a degree in broadcast journalism. Making that pivot into tech was a little bit of a hurdle. And so being able to solidify a sponsor who was in that space, understood the industry, had connections and networking relationships that I could leverage through my relationship with my sponsor was critically important. And so that would be another nugget that I would just share, is try to find a sponsor in the industry with which you seek to move into.
LJ, I'll let you, if you want to add into anything on this part.
I'd say with that mentor, I'd question, don't be afraid to talk to them. If depending, only the depth of the relationship, but a mentorship relationship where you're considering a career change, you should also be able to have that conversation as well with the person. And unless there's something that like you fear in the conversation, ask yourself what that is. But I would say that there's never a reason to discard a relationship. It usually should lean into they're wanting you to grow beyond where you are at.
Yep. And I would also add to, from what was discussed earlier, you can see those as friendships, using Lauren's example, with Bazoma. Did I say her name? Bazoma?
Bozema.
Bozema, thank you. Because she is my idol and I don't know how to say her name. That's very embarrassing here. But to see for someone as herself to say no, but to still be able to have a friendship out of that, I think is a really great example. And even something that can be, seen without having to dissolve the relationship. That person can still be a true friend and maybe provide or, give advice in a different format or a different structure. Another question that was raised was, how do you go about having conversations with a coach, a sponsor, or a mentor? If you're, seeking an individual, what would you say are some of the steps, or, is there a way to format your email or your LinkedIn message to, share what exactly you're hoping to gain out of this relationship? And just what are kind of those best practices or steps to get to that first initial step?
I would say one thing is to ask the person about their journey. Ask them, how did you get to where you are currently? People love to talk about themselves. So once you do that, you have opened the door. And so it opens the door for you to ask more specific questions, and it opens doors to secure a calendar invite to actually get the person to talk to you, and you can talk to them about what your desires are and your needs. But I would say just ask them about their journey. Most people are happy to share.
Yeah, and I also think that the conversation around obtaining a mentor versus a coach, they're very different. A coach is goal oriented and future focused, and you are usually paying that person. So you want to be very clear and intentional on how you're spending your money and what you want to accomplish. Whereas a mentorship relationship is a little bit different. It's more like an exchange and collaboration. A coach is going to hold you accountable, just like a personal trainer might. but it's really on you to identify what you want. They are not going to tell you what to do, but they will hold you accountable for the things that you stated that you want to do, and you're paying them to do that.
And lastly, the thing I'll add is that one of my mentors, which we actually discussed him earlier, he's one of the male mentors that I have. He gave me some advice a few years ago. He said that if you're reaching out to someone by way of an introduction from a mutual colleague or friend, the best way to do that is to ask the individual for time on their calendar, but also to offer in exchange something that you would provide through the relationship or through the conversation. So for example, if I were reaching out to, either one of the panelists and I know that they have their own business, I would ask, I would love to pick your brain on a given topic. In exchange, I'd also like to talk to you about how I can help you leverage Facebook ad credits for your business to spread the word about your company. So leveraging something that you could also offer to them in exchange, I think that might make them more likely, once they see the email and they recognize the time it's going to take to have that conversation, understanding that it will provide a mutual benefit for them, I think is really impactful, especially if you're reaching out to someone that you don't already have a relationship with.
What I would add to that, Lauren, is just make sure that when you're reaching out, that you represent yourself well. So your brand is very critical, that you don't get another first impression. So how you represent yourself and what your personal brand is going to be critical in response, for sure.
Definitely, I totally agree on the representation, and I love that piece, Lauren, on what you can offer in return. Going back to the idea of a two-way relationship, and there's something that can be provided to that individual, no matter what level they are, and that's something that you can stand true in doing so. I love that idea. I think that's a really great way, a tangible way of building that relationship. Another question that was also raised was about peer-to-peer. We are talking about sponsorship at a certain level for career advancement. What is your thoughts around peer mentorship? I'll kick it over to LJ first.
I think peer mentorship can be very powerful when it comes to accountability and then pushing you into new spaces and exploring just new skills. So you and your peer may have different skills or different areas of expertise, and so you can push each other in that space. I found peer-to-peer mentoring very helpful in my career around, in the beginning of the career when we were first looking at project management as a potential path for advancement. I found that was a great way for all of us to kind of move forward. I remember when I first, and I'll give one more example. When I was in my first job, one of my mentors, who happened to be my boss, she said, "This company will pay for your master's degree. They do not ask for anything back. There is no reason why you should not go and get your master's degree, because as a woman, you're always going to need more." She's a female, and she was right. And so I did that. I went and got my master's degree, and as I was pursuing it, my peers realized the same thing because I shared the message. And so they also went to get their master's degree. And so the peer-to-peer mentoring that started to occur was we pushed each other to keep growing.
I'll just add that, yeah, I completely agree. I think it's, everyone, and I think peers are no exception to that. I think some of probably the most transparent conversations that I've had have come from peers, just about, a situation that I'm going through, getting their feedback on how they might handle it, if they've dealt with something similar or perhaps they haven't, but seeking feedback and advice from my peers is incredibly valuable. I think the relationship and the dynamic is a little bit different, but I think that consulting with those around you, is incredibly helpful. I often, when I think about, taking a new job or exploring professional opportunities, I've consulted with many of my peers, some of which are on this call today. And I think, again, it goes back to this idea of you can learn from any and everywhere. And I think it's important to seek those that you trust. Make sure that there's somebody who you value their feedback, and they're not just, I think I have friends that I love dearly, but probably wouldn't seek their advice on a professional obstacle. And that doesn't mean that I don't trust their feedback, but I think, sometimes you're looking for something that's very specific. And so make sure that it's someone that you trust. But absolutely, I think peer-to-peer relationships are valuable.
Again, I'm not going to be redundant, but in a nutshell, it keeps you sharp. It just keeps you sharp. It keeps you on your toes with the peer-to-peer, and also consider that that peer may be promoted. It's always, I always think about that next level networking opportunity. You don't know where that person is going to be. So yeah, it's critical too.
All right, I have two more questions, but someone may feel more inclined to raise their question and saying it. So I want to open up the floor. Did anybody want to ask a question for our panelists and moderator? All right, hearing none. One question is around managing these relationships. How often are you meeting with your mentor, sponsors, coaches? How do you keep up with your relationships? I had a dialogue with a couple of people actually in this chat about using an Excel document as a way to somewhat, keep up with some of the last dialogues that you've had or conversations that you've had, as a way of, somewhat of your own level of project personal management. So curious how you all are managing your relationships.
Very similar to that, Lauren. Elstray is the calendar, those calendar invites, and the follow-up of actual follow-up recap helps me with mentees or definitely clients. And it our next meeting piggyback off of the previous meeting. So we're not wasting any time and continuing the conversation. However, I will say it depends on the individual and the mentor, coach, or sponsor on the cadence of it. But maybe weekly may be good, depending on what's going on in that mentee's life. Maybe good, maybe it's a career thing, but monthly may be good. So that cadence is going to be determined by both parties.
Yeah, I'd say I'm not as organized as keeping it in a spreadsheet. I am a very organized person, but following up with people in a spreadsheet is not something that I've been doing. I think when I was in the workforce going to a job and I had a proper mentor, I think monthly I tried to touch base and check in just so that I was on the top of their mind. And I think it was more just about making sure that they remember me, they understand what I'm working on, and that I understand what they're working on, because there might be the opportunity where I can volunteer on a project or initiative that they're working on. And that was when I was in the workforce. Now it's a little bit less organized because I realize that as an entrepreneur, I have different streams of activity and different things happening. But I do try to reach out to people that I haven't spoken to at least once a month-ish. I think that's pretty much my cadence and my appetite for a conversation anyway. So I will say once a month is just a good enough amount of time to, even if it's just an email. So remember, touching base with someone doesn't mean you need to have a 15 to 30-minute meeting. It could just be sending an email saying, how are you? What are you working on? Or I saw this and I thought of you. Adding value, it can be as easy as you sending something to your mentor that is valuable to them and they think about you and contact you back.
I think the underlying message that everyone is sort of sharing is it's very personal to the relationship that you have and what your needs are. I think what works for me may not work for you, and vice versa. So I think it's just about figuring out what that looks like for you. I think I mentioned earlier, for me, I'm a very calendar, as Lori mentioned, is like my tool. I keep my phone and my calendar with me, every second of every day. So I think for me, what works is, when I make the ask for someone to be my mentor, sponsor, or advisor, or if I'm serving as a mentor for someone else, on the onset, being very clear about what the meeting cadence looks like and committing to that on the onset is super helpful, because life is busy and things come up, and if it falls off the calendar, it's hard to kind of get that time back. And so for me, making that commitment on the onset is super helpful. As I mentioned, for mentors, for me, it's 2 times a month. For sponsors, it's 2 times a year at minimum, although it does end up being a little bit more than that. And then for coaches or advisors, it's on an as needed basis. So I work with a professional public speaking coach. And there's, for me, seasonal ebbs and flows of when we meet. When it's, public speaking season and I'm doing keynotes or the like, and a lot of different events are coming up back to back, I work with her more in that season than I do maybe on other seasons. And so it's about just kind of figuring out what makes sense based on what's going on. And then to your question on just preparation, again, I try to send an agenda 48 hours in advance, and say, hey, for our meeting coming up on Saturday, here's how I'd like to use the time. And we often don't stick to that, but having a general rule of thumb is just helpful to drive the conversation, and I think also makes my mentors feel like we are using the time effectively. And then after the conversation, I provide some quick bullets, not a full 3-page document or anything like that, but some quick bullets on what I heard and what their advice was, and then how I'm going to actualize that in my life. And if I need to, if they've given me some guidance on, you should try doing this, and I owe them a follow-up, trying to do that rather quickly so that they can see that I still remain dedicated to the conversation and the relationship. Again, that works for me. It doesn't work for everybody else, but I think just figuring out what that looks like for you and sticking to that and making that commitment is critical.
I'll add to that, Lauren. Both Laurens, is when you think about those folks who play that role, those roles in your life, also think about generationally too, because there is a difference in generations on how people like to be followed up with, and their expectations. It is quite different. So just make sure you understand what those dynamics are before you commit, because what you may think is sufficient, that person may not, and it is truly a generational difference.
Yeah, definitely. And I think these are all good foundational tips, and certainly you can use them to find whether or not that works best for you, or, adapt. But I think these are all really good ways of establishing that relationship, managing that relationship, and then, figuring out what's the best way or best cadence, or with that individual, or even best cadence for yourself, just depending on what you are doing in your own season. My last question is, any sort of resources, whether that's books, articles, people to follow, relative to either mentorship or professional development? I'll kick it off with Lauren first.
Sure. So I think in terms of resources, I find that Medium, which is probably one of my favorite platforms, is a great way to just understand what people have done that has worked and things that haven't worked. Specifically, if you want to follow someone by the name of Ty Ahmad Taylor, and I can put his name in the chat or share with Lauren to follow up on a post-event email or something. I have found that a lot of his instructions have worked for me, or things that he's learned from. Everything from, he has a template for, I think someone asked earlier, a template that you might send to someone. He's got a really great template that I've really enjoyed leveraging and customizing for my needs. Certainly invite you to check out my website or to connect with me after the fact. I think in terms of, people that I follow who serve as mentors for me, I mean, again, I think that that's very personal, and it depends on sort of what your goals are. I love what Lori said earlier about, I'm actually not sure if that happened right before this call, but there are people that she follows that are, what she said, mentors from afar. I love that terminology. And certainly as I think about it, and as I was reflecting on her statement earlier, I was thinking, well, I guess I do have some mentors from afar that they probably don't even know I exist, but they certainly are mentors to me. I actually also find that podcasts are effective. I know a lot of people listen to a lot of podcasts, but I think, that has been a space where I've gathered a lot of information from that I just previously had not, thought that was a helpful resource for me. So definitely recommend finding a podcast in the space of which you seek some information. And then lastly, what I'll just add is that, it's important that when you're in spaces like the one we're in today, if there's something that someone has said that really resonated with you, I would urge you to not let your maybe nervousness or fear prevent you from reaching out directly. I think this is a very intimate space, and I know we have our cameras off. So we haven't been able to see all of your faces, but hopefully before we close today, we'll have an opportunity to do that. But I think, this is a very unique opportunity to have such an intimate conversation about a topic that is so important to your growth and development. And so if there's something that's been said that resonates with you, please do not hesitate to reach out. I think I speak for everybody who has their camera on right now. Please do not hesitate to reach out to any of us, because, we would love to be able to continue the conversation. If we can't commit to being a mentor or an advisor or a sponsor, we can certainly point you in a direction that might be suitable for your needs. So would urge you to take that call to action following this session.
I kind of want to add something as well, Lauren. Lauren Legette, she mentioned not only just having a mentor from afar and to capture like podcasts as a source or a resource or a tool, but I would advise on TED Talks, because you get them in short little 20-minute, 30-minute TED Talks, and you just, type in a specific topic and you'll get a lot. I love TED Talks, and I frequent them often, and I think TED Talks could be a really good source to get, just like I said, quick little nuggets and answers to a lot of mentoring or sponsoring or coaching advice.
Oh, okay, I'll jump in. I'll jump in here.
Please.
So I'm a dork. So I follow quite a few people. I'm not going to bore you all with all the folks that I follow, but definitely Carla Harris, Carla with a C, is someone that is just wonderful as it pertains to women in the workplace, women of color, leadership, and just overall give you a good grasp. So Carla Harris is excellent to follow. She's also on TED Talks and YouTube, and definitely you can follow her on IG. The other organization that I follow is Bishop T.D. Jakes Enterprises. So Bishop Jakes is a spiritual or faith leader, but he certainly is a consummate businessman. And so I do follow him on T.D. Jakes Enterprises on Instagram. And he has great information that he puts out there. And then, you guys don't have to follow this, but I do, and I actually read it. I follow the EEOC, and maybe the nature of my business that I follow them, but a lot of cool things that you would not know just around workforce, labor law, training, available monies that are coming out towards training is on EEOC. So I'm not offended if you don't follow them, but it's a good resource.
Okay, so I'll share a few things. So good thing with the podcast. So I started a podcast for that very reason. I think sometimes if you don't hear there's information, and if you don't hear it, you have to create it. So this is noted, right? Noted is I don't see the representation of the news in the format I need it. I create it. I didn't see a podcast that spoke about the beauty of playing golf for the career advancement or for growing yourself personally and professionally. So I created a podcast, and I have conversations with people about that. And it's called Tease Me. So shameless plug, TEESME. And one of the guests that I had was this woman named Minda Harts, and she wrote this book called The Memo. And the memo really speaks about the experiences of women of color in the office and how do you navigate through that. What's interesting is the book is not just for women, it's for men as well. And so in speaking with her, it's serendipitous. I met this man. I'll try to give the short version of this. I'm a huge advocate of data justice. I'm an advocate of data justice in the sense that we do not sit in the boardrooms where these decisions about how data will be utilized and aggregated, we people of color are not often in those spaces. And in the future, when this information is so tied up, it will be difficult to ensure that people of color are protected. And I say this because there's scenarios where, like, if you experienced fraud or identity theft, if you are on public housing, you could technically lose all of your benefits because the time it takes to remediate that, there's just not enough time to do that and be able to keep your benefits. There are a whole lot of case studies. So I met a gentleman who introduced me to Minda Harts because she was a guest speaker. And then in turn, I had her on my podcast to talk about the importance of that advocacy, because you are trying to find a sponsor and you're trying to find a mentor, but you are also navigating very treacherous waters as a person of color, as a woman. And what we cannot, it'd be remiss for me to act as if those things didn't exist. So as you're seeking a sponsor, someone might not want to sponsor you and might not want to mentor you, surely by the color of your skin, by your sex, or wherever you're from, or what school you did not go to. And so you have to be aware of the fact that that is real and that is true. So do not be dismayed and do not be discouraged. Just keep looking and keep advocating for yourself and do not give up. Hence, be intentional. So check out my podcast, one, because that's a resource. Check out Minda's book, because that's a resource as well. I often read the Harvard Business Review. I love white papers, and I love just the content and the studies that they present in PR as well. And I think that a lot of this information can tell us a little bit about what's happening in the world and the studies that are being conducted. I often look to see how diverse those studies are, and are they inclusive, and intentionally identifying when they're doing these studies that they've included people of color. So look for that in any content that you're researching. 100 people said, 100 people who? 100 people where? 100 people how? Like, how did you find these people? Are they all your friends? So, question the sources of data. There was a book that I first read when I got into, when I started working at Barclays, Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office. I thought that book was so powerful for me at that time, because it really kind of taught me to advocate for myself and to do it with humility and not with, just not expecting people to see my work, to know that I need to communicate that, and to know that that combined with being intentional about finding a mentor can position you for people to understand who you are and and your integrity and what you bring to the table. I'll stop there.
You have all the resources, and thank you for plugging me in there and saying how Noted became what Noted is today. So, and same to you with your podcast. So those were all amazing, great gems. And I cannot thank you all so much again. If we could please give a round of applause to our moderator and our panelists. They are all very deserving. You may do your round of applause visually, or you can use the reaction tool if you would like to. But you all are amazing women with a great deal of insight, perspective, and undoubtedly, true inspirations for all of us here. So I did want to leave the opportunity. How can everyone stay connected, follow, chat with you? Please let our folks here on the phone know. I'll start with LJ.
Sure. Let's connect on LinkedIn. I don't know how to undo my check mark thing, so I don't know what faster means, but I don't know how to get. Oh, thank you. It went away. Good. Let's connect on LinkedIn. I will put my link in the chat. I think Lauren, Australia, you'll give out the information as well. Check out the podcast. You can subscribe. It's easy. I'll put that in the link as well. And I'm also on Instagram and Clubhouse, so you can find us there as well. Find me there.
Follow. Oh, go ahead, Lauren.
Sorry. So I absolutely have to plug following me on Instagram since I work for the company. So Lauren Legette _ on Instagram. Definitely reach out via the DMs, as they say. And you can certainly reach out to me on my website, www.laurenlegette.com.
And for me, it's going to be LinkedIn at my name. You'll provide that, Lauren. Would you provide that information? Yeah. Okay, on LinkedIn. And for sure via Instagram at LGO Consulting _ You'll correct that. So that's the best way to reach me.
And Darlene?
I would say LinkedIn is the best way to reach me as well. And it's just my name, Darlene Goye, Goyea.
Amazing. And thank you to everyone that here is on the line or on the Zoom with us, for joining us in this afternoon. Hopefully it's sunny and bright for you all as well. We hope you also were able to take some key takeaways and essential information on building your professional trifecta. And for those that said that I made you come, thank you for coming per my request. as everybody mentioned, please be on the lookout from an email from wearenoted@gmail.com on how you can connect with these ladies if you aren't able to catch it here in the chat. Additionally, there will be an opportunity to provide feedback on this event. I love free feedback. I love crowdsourcing. I need all the insights. I need all the gems and how I can perfect and make this better. Although it has already started at a very, very high peak with these ladies here. And if you are not a noted subscriber, please feel free to add your email to the chat, and we'll add you to the list, or I will certainly follow up with that information in our email. So looks like we're 10 minutes early. Time getting back. Oh my God. Thank you, everyone, and we shall hopefully see each other all again soon at the next Noted event. Thank you. Bye, everyone.